Hey there, thanks for tuning into Duckbricks. I'm Chris, and today we are continuing my weekly series on LEGO Elves, one of the most underrated LEGO themes ever in my opinion. Last week we took a look at Wave 1. In 2015, we were introduced to the world of Elvendale, but this year we are turning into the Dragon Year of 2016. And so, let's jump into Elves Year number 2. Last week's video explored the story and sets of LEGO Elves 2015, the first wave. So of course, now we're diving into the second year in 2016. Now LEGO Elves was an unprecedented success for the LEGO group, so much so that they didn't really expect it to do so well, and they had to quickly put a lot of their plans for future sets into motion, resulting in the Dragon Year of 2016. Coming with not just a lot more LEGO sets, but a bigger emphasis on storytelling, lore, and world building than we really had seen in 2015. As a recap of 2015, we learned that the protagonist, Emily Jones, was the descendant of an elf who basically made a sacrifice and chose to turn in her immortality for a life in the real world so she could guard the portal to Elvendale. Years later, her granddaughter Emily discovers this portal and goes on an adventure with 4 magical elves focused on controlling the elements of fire, air, water, and earth. These 4 elves, along with Emily, discover these magical keys which allow them to unlock a portal in which Emily can travel back to Earth, meaning that anytime she wants, Emily can go ahead and visit her elf friends in Elvendale, but also just pop back to Earth for her normal life. Aside from that plotline, there wasn't really anything else going on with the story of LEGO Elves in 2015, and the entire focus was on world building and fun adventures in this fantasy environment. But since those sets did so well in 2015, LEGO decided to up the stakes in 2016, deepening the world building and introducing the first main villain of the theme, Regana Shadowflame, an elven witch. Basically, her backstory was that she was a fire elf born with very weak magic powers, feeling left out and alone, and instead of training her magic, she learned how to boost her magic using other means, starting her on a dark path. Of course, she tapped into dark magic, choosing to use witchcraft instead of her original element of fire by drawing power from a mysterious shadow fountain. While they may not have known it at the time, the Shadow Fountain would become a lot more plot relevant in the LEGO Elves storyline, revealing it to eventually have been the source of all evil, Noctura, as she tries to make her way from the Shadow Realm over to the real world in 2018. But we're still a few years out from that. In 2016, we focus on Regana as she goes on this quest to enslave the dragons, kidnapping the Queen Dragon Elandra and trying to siphon her powers for herself, and that's really where the story begins. The release cycle of LEGO Elves in 2016 focused on 2 major set waves. The initial set wave in March focusing on 6 sets and introducing you to the dragons with a water dragon, fire dragon, and earth dragon, alongside a marketplace, lava cave, Starlight Inn, a school of dragons, and a small little baby dragon set. And in the summer, beginning of June, they kick things up a notch, introducing the more villainous aspect of the line, with a magic shadow castle for Regana being the flagship set of the 4-set summer wave, bringing the total of sets released in 2016 to 10 different LEGO Elves sets, not including Polybags or supplemental materials. Elves also got a magazine, which they started to release alongside the later year of 2015 when they realized that the theme was doing quite well, and this was a substantial increase from the initial wave of LEGO Elves sets, which had 6 sets in January but only 2 sets in the summer, and many of those sets were a lot smaller than these. So let's go ahead and dive into LEGO Elves 2016, starting off with the updates to the minifigures for the first half of the year. For the second year of LEGO Elves, the whole crew got decked out in brand new outfits. Each of the outfits showcases the logos of each of their respective elements, some larger or smaller than others, and Emily got an upgrade with a slightly different style of shirt with the amulet on the neck still visible. Honestly, Emily is once again probably the least interesting style out of all the characters here, especially compared to all of the different colors and contrasting color schemes of the elves, but it is nice to have a self-insert character once in a while. Azari has a slightly different style of top, which is a flame yellowish orange color and magenta. I really do like the detailing on the stitching, and you can see the flame pattern going upwards along the top itself. It's probably one of my favorite outfits they've given the elves so far, whereas the other different elves all have elemental themed outfits. Nida has a top that looks like the crest of a wave cascading over the top there, which is a really nice detail in metallic silver. And as we go on to Ira, she has the prominent wings in the center as well as a feather necklace. Honestly, this one is probably one of the least interesting ones to me because it is just a large symbol in the center of the chest, but I do appreciate how they all have very distinct outfits, and Farron has arguably the most simplified version of the outfits yet, featuring just a standard top with just a little bit of a darker green pattern on one side, and a small Earth logo in the corner. As usual, all of the elves have a little tattoo or symbol on their arms which showcases the element, and these are all really nicely done up in metallic colors, which you can see here when you turn them to their sides. Azari has a metallic gold fire emblem, Nida's got a metallic silver water emblem. As we go over to Ira, we have another metallic gold kind of air emblem, and then finally Farron has a copper colored earth emblem. Altogether, the elves are really once again nicely produced. I love the dual molding that went into the lower skirts in particular, making them feel incredibly detailed and complex, including printing on the sandals themselves. And the hair is the same as last year, which is pretty much the same as they have always had, with the dual color paint, which again unfortunately does tend to scuff out a little bit, but if you are careful with it, they generally tend to not be that bad. Moving on though, the series also introduced 2 new characters on the side of the good guys for the first half of the year, so let's take a look at those right now. For the first half of the year, we were introduced to Titus Stormsurfer, a water elf, as well as Syra Copperbranch, an earth elf. These were distinct characters, one of which runs the Dragon School. Titus has a special connection to dragons and is able to train them and teach them the ways of the elements, whereas Syra runs the Starlight Inn and is a close friend of Titus's who also has an affinity for inventing and flying, utilizing her various flying machines throughout their adventures. I'm always a big fan when action-adventure themes introduce new side characters that really help flesh out the world. Ninjago typically does 1 or 2 of them every single season, and Elves was quickly catching on. One aspect of Syra that I really appreciate is that obviously her last name is Copperbranch, so there are a lot of copper detailings on the minifigures, from the lace on the boots to the trim of the skirt to even the way the straps are fashioned on the dress there. Everything is copper and earth themed, which is a really nice difference compared to the original Earth Elf Farron, who has more traditional Earth Elf style clothes. The lavender streak in the hair really does help set her apart as well, and it is very cool to get just another different coloration of elf-oriented hair, particularly for a new character like this. Titus, on the other hand, unfortunately is relegated to just use the standard male elf hair, this time recolored in blue, which I guess totally works, but it would have been cool to get a slightly different style. Still, it's not a big deal. I think it does work for the character, and I do like the detailing on him. Again, he's very different than the other water elf that we got so far, Nida, who traditionally used brighter colors. Titus, on the other hand, uses darker blue colors and shades of copper in his armor, which I really do think is a good way to differentiate them as completely different characters. But with the minifigures for the first half of the year out of the way, let's go ahead and take a look at the sets in chronological order of how the characters actually encounter them and the way the story plays out. Of course, to cover the animals from the first half of the wave, the prior year in 2015 we were introduced to the adorable new baby dragon mold for elves. This one is the dragon Miku, and then we got a whole host of other dragons that basically served as the collectibles for this particular wave. First off, for the element of Earth, we have Floria, the baby Earth dragon. The baby Fire dragon is named Spark. The baby Queen dragon, arguably the most important of all of them, is Astari. And then we have the baby Water dragon Rain. And then finally the baby Air dragon Fledge. We also got a return of the fire-oriented fox, as well as a new owl, a messenger owl, where you can see on the logo on the chest, it is an air-oriented messenger owl to aid the heroes on their quest. Altogether, these made for really cool collectibles, and while admittedly the first half of the year did not have every single one of the eggs, I figured it made sense to showcase all the baby dragons at once, and then dive into what specific sets they actually come in. In actuality, LEGO split up the collecting of the particular dragons. Some of them came in the first wave, and some of the others came in the second wave, which was a really good way to incentivize people to collect all the sets. I know I personally had to get all the sets that featured a baby dragon just because of these adorable dual molds. Typically, to be completely honest, I am not the biggest fan of the LEGO Friends-themed animals. I feel like they're just a little bit too cutesy and don't necessarily really fit the LEGO style. However, that is not how I feel about these baby dragons. I feel like they toe the line to being, yes, in the cutesy realm, especially with the prince, but they also feel like really nicely molded, just fantasy-inspired baby dragons as well. And at least for me personally, the fact that these are so cute definitely just off-puts and overpowered the typical distaste that I have for the standard Friends animals. These ones are just genuinely really cute molds, and I love how every single one was dual molded with painted gold horns. So you have transparent purple, trans blue, trans light blue, transparent red, and transparent green for all of the dragons here. We'd only see one other dragon in the later years for the baby dragons, so we'll get to that when we get to 2017, but overall this is all but one of the baby dragons that Elves was going to introduce to us, which makes sense because this was absolutely the year of the dragon when it came to LEGO Elves. And while it is unfortunate that we did just get a reuse of one of the 2015 animals, I think that's a fair compromise because obviously the focus was on the dragons and not necessarily on other animals. But now, let's jump in to the actual sets, going in chronological order of where the Elves encounter them in the storyline. We're going to start off with the first set, which is actually the smallest set of the March Wave. 41171 was Emily Jones and the Baby Wind Dragon. This retailed for $10 or 10 euros when it launched on March 1st, 2016, and included around 80 pieces. In today's money, adjusting for inflation, that would be around $13. The set includes a small piece of scenery, one of the brand new molds for the elf eggs, which I guess technically that's two brand new molds, the new dual molded baby wind dragon, and of course you have Emily herself as the main character of the theme. Since this is just a small $10 set, there's honestly not that much you can actually do with it, although I do actually kind of like it as just a tiny little slice of life in the Elvendale world. The story actually technically kickstarts with Nida being the one to discover the dragon eggs after the evil dark witch Regana has captured the queen dragon and the eggs are left behind. Nida is the one to gather up all of the eggs and bring them back to the treehouse, so the set obviously doesn't necessarily stick to the canon storyline, but I think it is a good introduction featuring the main character and the brand new gimmick for the collectibles of the wave. This is a really charming little set where you can see it just has a very simple play feature where you can perch the baby dragon on the waterfall here and you can kind of just spin this lever and then the baby dragon will tumble downwards. It's not the most exciting play feature, and honestly I don't necessarily even know if they needed to include it. I probably would have preferred for them to maybe have just a little bit of a better way to depict the actual set itself and maybe just add to the foliage rather than having a play feature, but I get it is a set for kids, so I do appreciate the effort. I guess the play pattern of the set is you take Emily and she sees a patch of green that she can walk on, so she steps up to here, but oh no, that place is not stable and she's gonna fall over when you rotate it, and she's gonna have to figure out another way to get up to be able to retrieve the dragon egg. The dragon eggs were these ornately molded, kind of almost sparkly type of Lego elements that came together in two different pieces. You can see that's how they were molded on the inside, and they each could house a single baby dragon. So you could pop the dragon inside, and there you go. You can see it inside the egg right there, just waiting to be hatched. In the show, the eggs are more the size of, well, regular eggs and not necessarily these almost Game of Thrones sized gigantic dragon eggs, but I think that in terms of a Lego set collecting aspect, I actually prefer the way that they look in the sets because this actually allows you to store the dragons on the inside. For $10, it is maybe not the best value. I think I probably would have wanted at least something either a little bit bigger or maybe even just another elf to go alongside them, even just throw in another animal to make it worth it, and especially adjusting for inflation, $13 is not really the best price for something like this, but as a set, agnostic of the price, I do like it as a little entry point into this world that just hinted at the adventures to come. But now, let's move on with the story and take a look at the next set. In chronological order of the story, the next set that comes up is 41173 Elvendale School of Dragons. It retailed for $20 or 20 euros when it released in March and came with 230 pieces, which today is around $26. Unfortunately, the set only came with one mini doll, but it did come with the baby dragon Miku, who we saw previously in 2015. The way the story went is that once Nida witnessed the evil shadow witch Regana enslaving the queen dragon and stealing one of her eggs, she managed to get the other eggs to safety and regroup with the main gang back at the treehouse. At the treehouse, they decide to seek out somebody who might be knowledgeable about dragons, and so they come across Titus. Despite this being a school for dragons, there is only one dragon included, although that is actually lore significant and relevant. Due to the kidnapping and enslavement of the queen dragon, the trust between the dragons and the elves had been broken, and only one student remained, Miku, who trusted Titus enough to continue teaching him how to fly. And so the entire set is based around the training and teaching of dragons, which is a really fun and unique concept to flesh out the world of elves. The main play feature is something you can probably spot already, and it basically is trying to teach Miku how to fly, where, as you can see, you can place Miku on the perch, and then you just move this crystal upwards, and in theory, just wait for it, there we go, very slowly Miku will slide downwards. Let's try that one more time and see if we can just get a little bit of a nicer slide down here. So again, you just perch Miku the dragon on the little stand here, you move it, and then there we go, a little bit better. You basically have an hourglass to be able to time how quickly Miku can fly down and make a loop. It's a pretty fun play feature, and it's a pretty nice and charming one that doesn't really take up too much space in the set, but works exactly how it should, so I have really no complaints. I also really like the inclusion of these vinyl fabric elements to incorporate the flag of the dragons on them, just adding a little bit extra to the set, as well as a nice little sticker for the instructions for Miku trying to fly around the tree. Now, the build is much like many of the other LEGO Elves builds, pretty two-dimensional. There's not a ton of depth here, although they did try the best with what they could. There's a little cave where you can actually reveal a secret hiding spot where maybe Miku the dragon can be going inside to sleep. It fits very perfectly in there, so that's a nice little touch. And there is even a little walkway for Miku to be able to fly upwards into the building itself. I really appreciate it when Elves does stuff like actually allowing you to have accessibility to the upper levels, and this is just no different. You can actually have the characters go up these wooden steps to make their way up to the actual top of the level. On the top you have a crossbow, which is used for defense, although unfortunately there isn't really anything to defend against. Regana the Shadow Elf would not be introduced in mini-doll form until the second half of the year, and it didn't really even include any of her evil animals, so the crossbow is just kind of there. I guess the dual function is you do have these little pastries, so you can choose to fire the pastries out of the crossbow and maybe into the mouths of dragons, so potentially that might not even be a defense thing, but something just to feed the dragons themselves and have them practice going for treats at great force. Here you can see the hourglass, which is timing how long it takes the eggs to hatch, although no egg is actually included in the set, because of course the eggs were carried by the main protagonists and didn't originate from this particular set. For a $20 introduction into the world of dragons, I do like it. It's a pretty charming build, and the play feature is a really fun one. It's honestly hard to ask for more. At a set that's $20, you have a mini doll, a mini dragon, as well as a fun play feature and a pretty nice fleshed out little display of both a building and a tree, so you have the combination of the nature and the actual elf built, I was about to say man built, but more like elf built architecture over here. And again, this is just kind of a taste of the types of buildings that we would eventually see to get in this wave and future waves as well. As a nice little entry into the world of LEGO Elves, it's a cute set and it's a good way to get that baby dragon in a much cheaper way than if you were to get it from some of the larger sets of 2015. So the only complaint I do have is that once again with the LEGO Elves sets, it really feels like they kind of scrimped out on giving us mini doll characters, and this will become a lot more apparent as we get to the larger sets, which still have only 2 or maybe at most 3 characters. At a $20 set, I guess it's fine to only have 1, but as the sets get bigger, I will start to notice the unfortunate trend that I really do feel like we should be getting more and more characters here. As they depart the Dragon School, the elves are bid to seek out Syra at the Starlight Inn, who is known to have a hub of information and might know more about Regana and where she might have taken the Queen Dragon. That brings us to set number 41174, the Starlight Inn, which retailed for $30 or 30 euros and came with 343 pieces. Adjusting for inflation, that would be around $38 today. Now, one quick caveat here, unfortunately I cannot seem to locate the small side build of the set anywhere in my collection, collection, it was a little bit of a cupboard with a tree sprouting out of it, and sadly nobody is selling just the side build, so I just simply couldn't find it for this video, but really the main focus is on the Starlight in itself, so let's go ahead and take a look at that. The mini-vols included are just a couple. You just have Syra, who makes sense because she runs the inn, as well as Azari, and you also have the first introduction of another one of the baby dragons, this time being the baby fire dragon alongside the fire egg. Moving into the build itself, this is a really nice and charming structure, and it easily is one of my favorite ones they did for Elves so far because of the architecture. I love that the windows are actually bent outwards on a curve, suggesting that this has some more unique architecture than just having it be built straight studs up and down, and you also have a really nice color scheme of dark green, bright green, as well as the wooden planks. You have a telescope that can be moved by rotating a pillar on the side of the tree, and onto here, you even have some foliage surrounding the set, plus a very cute sign of a dragon falling asleep. On the side here, there is a little flickering flame, and I guess the entire point or play function of this is that if you place the baby dragon on here, you can actually cause it to fling the dragon outwards by twisting this knob. If you are careful and maybe just very gently place the dragon here, you can... well, you're supposed to be able to fling it, but since this is just mounted on a single bar, it's not super easy. There you go, that's how it works. So it's not the most accurate play function in terms of functioning the best all the time, and I definitely would have preferred maybe something a little bit easier to actuate, but I guess it's not too bad, and if you very gently put the dragon there, then you can go ahead and boom, cause the dragon to be launched outwards. On the inside of the inn, there is a pretty nice little cozy interior. You can see that there is a place for you to get some food and some drinks at the tavern, a sticker that is pertaining to a dragon kind of getting some cupcakes with the use of air magic, so that's why there is a little symbol of the wings above there, and as you rotate this column here, you can see there is a hidden key, which I guess presumably is meant to unlock the side build of the shed, or maybe just a key to access some of the upper rooms. Moving upwards to the one room included for the Starlight Inn, it does just have a simple bed, but there is a bit of a secret because you can pull this shelf out and see some luggage hidden on the inside, so you can always store your luggage inside the bed. And then finally, on the top, there is just a sticker showcasing mapping out one of the constellations, which coincidentally is in the shape of a dragon, of course. Overall, for a $30 set, I actually really like this one as well. The Elves architecture would only get better from here, but they were really trying to hone down what they wanted it to look like. The only downside is that it is fairly gappy in the way that this window was done around the roof, so you can very clearly see that there aren't windows here, it's just kind of open air, so definitely would have preferred that to be a bit better, but I do appreciate how this does feel a bit more three-dimensional than many of the other sets, which typically, up to this point, had just felt like 2D facades. This feels like it has a little more depth to it. Now, in terms of the value, $30 for this, again, really only the complaint here is I feel like it could have just used one more mini doll, and I think I could say that about most of the sets. There is a dearth of characters included, and it would have been really cool to just see one of the other elves, or maybe just another character from the village staying at the inn, but as it is, not too bad. Like that we got the little fire dragon here, and this is a pretty average Elves set. Not much else I can say about this one, so let's go ahead and move on and keep progressing that story. After spending a night at the Starlight Inn, the Elves have to immediately set off, for the dragons have hatched, and they are actually getting sicker by the minute they are without the queen. And so, Sierra brings them to 41176, the secret marketplace, a marketplace hidden deep within the mountains on their way over to the Shadowlands to be able to fight Regana. This is a set that retailed for $60 or 60 euros and came with 691 pieces. Adjusting for inflation, this would be around $78 today. Now, this is, of course, the first appearance so far in the storyline and sets of the fully grown adult dragon. They encountered the Earth Dragon back in the Dragon School, and Farron has another chance to encounter him once more in the actual marketplace area. The set does only include, despite being $60 when it came out, two mini dolls, Ira and Farron, no even inclusion of Syra, which would have been a perfect one because she was the one who introduced them to the marketplace, or even any other side civilian characters, where for the marketplace it is implied that the animals are actually the ones who are manning it, which is a cute touch, but I also definitely feel like is maybe a little bit of a cop-out, especially because one of those animals did already appear in the 2015 wave. However, a lot of the focus on the set is placed towards the dragon, so we're actually going to start off by taking a look at that. This is a medium to small size dragon, given that it is just one of the side builds of the set, but the build is pretty much very similar to how many of the other dragons would be depicted in the LEGO Elves lineup. And I feel like I have probably the most to say about these ones. I am a little bit mixed about these dragons, to be completely honest. You might notice that the legs are pretty much just fully straight, no articulation in terms of bending it outwards, despite the fact that they are mounted on mixel joints. The reason for that is because the designers of the Elves creatures really wanted it to be easy for kids to play with. And so, while you can kind of splay the legs outwards for the back legs here, which definitely does add a lot more to posability, the front legs are basically just confined to not being able to move them any outwards other than this. That means that, unfortunately, while I feel like it would be cool to pose it with the leg maybe splayed like this, or posed at an angle like so, you just can't do that. The best you can do is bend it inwards, but that's not really that useful because you don't really want to have the dragon posed with the legs crossed. And so, I definitely do feel like they probably went a little too overboard on making the dragons easy to play with for kids by doing this. And I guess I get it for some of the smaller ones if they really were concerned about posing, but even the larger Elves dragons have this exact same issue, and that's where it becomes a bigger problem. Still, I really do love the aesthetics of all of the dragons, and the Earth Dragon is no different. You have these really nice dual molded wing elements in transparent green and lime green. They're actually smaller versions of the previous Fantasy era and Vikings Castle Dragon Wing, which is a really nice touch and definitely one that makes sense to include for a dragon of this size. On the back you have a transparent green club tail infused with the element of Earth. You have a treasure chest on here with a map to Regana's castle, and you even have the symbol of the Earth element printed on the top there. Now, all of the dragons pretty much share the exact same head, except for the Queen Dragon, who sports a slightly larger head, which we'll get to later on when we hit the summer wave. Now, because of this, sometimes the scaling is a little bit goofy, but I think for Elves it does work. The head is obviously oversized compared to the body, and one would argue it's a little undersized for some of the larger dragons, but they had to come up with a happy medium because obviously they didn't have mold budget to create brand new heads for every single one of the dragons, so I think they did the best they could. Ninjago did suffer from this in the first year of Dragons as well, and I think for Elves it does actually work because the dragons are trying to be sort of cute and friendly in their appearance, so I actually kind of like the way they've presented it. A new jaw piece was introduced, allowing you to click it open and shut just like this, and I do like the range of motion you get for the jaw. It is always good to be able to open and close the mouths of the dragons, and while the jaw piece doesn't really have any teeth or anything like that factored underneath it, which I think would have helped with the aesthetic, it's still nice to get, and I do like how they were able to paint the teeth white here, just adding an extra layer of detail for the dragon itself. Moving onwards, we can take a look at the two buildings, and these are not connected. They are basically just two independent buildings, but I appreciate how they managed to factor in a little reference to many of the different elements in the builds, where, as you can see here, the library is Earth-themed, where you have it green-colored here with a book. I love the usage of the Unikitty tails in tan as the formation of the sign, and you have this being able to swing open. You can see all sorts of different features, such as a little hidden book that you could actually find inside the tree here by rotating this little Technic lever, as well as seeing the inside of the library on the back as well, which you can see on the inside has been made up of standard 1x2 plates just aligned in order. Over to the top of the post here, you have a more air-oriented building, where this is the air-themed messenger owl, so the owl is flying off delivering letters throughout the land. You can see the feathers oriented towards the element of wind, and as you can see here, there is a mailbox on the inside and a pretty nice in-depth system of packages, a nice sticker for a package there, and they even have a little place for presumably the owl to sleep because it is just a little miniature bed, which is a very, very cute and nice touch for a building like this. Overall, this is a really nice blend of the different elements for the first building here, and they did manage to include another one of those specialized dragon flags in vinyl, which is a nice piece to include for these builds. The smaller build is the fire-oriented blacksmith build, and it features a tried and true function that many LEGO castle sets featured, which is just the anvil which is striking a sword, where as you can see, twisting this piece right here allows the anvil to actuate and strike the sword as the blacksmith is hard at work. Unfortunately, no blacksmith is included unless you count the fox, which is presumably, I guess, supposed to be the blacksmith of the set, but again, this is just kind of showcasing how little we actually got in terms of side characters or just civilian characters in general. Moving on to the front here, there was a shield that was mounted there, as well as the hourglass, which was, again, a really beautiful new piece introduced for this theme, and I'm really glad they actually brought the mold back for the LEGO Disney Princess's Frozen Ice Castle, and now it's used throughout LEGO Dreams. It's just a really fantastic piece that I'm glad they introduced, but overall, not much else to see here. Otherwise, you just have most of the elements represented, no water representation, but we would see some more water-themed builds later on, and as a $60 set, aside from the lack of extra mini dolls, this actually feels pretty fair to me. You get a fairly decent sized dragon, you get 2 different buildings, you get stuff to do inside the buildings, you also get 2 different animals, one of which is unique and exclusive to the set, and this is a really nice example of fantastic LEGO Elves architecture, where placed together it just absolutely helps flesh out the world. I love how you have these different buildings that are meant for different things, the blacksmith store, the library, the mail post. It just provides some variety and world building to the Elvendale realm itself, and I do appreciate getting a lot more buildings like this that aren't necessarily all just focused on the main story objective. But with that, we can move on to the next thing in the story, and it's actually a bit of a surprising thing. To be honest, I wasn't necessarily planning on covering Polybags in this Elves retrospective, but this one featured so much in the story and kept getting referenced in the episodes that I had to mention it for this entire story walkthrough because it felt really cool to actually have a Polybag have significant story relevance, which is pretty rare for an action-adventure LEGO theme. This is 30375 Sierra's Adventurous Air Glider, and when it retailed it was $5, as were all other Polybags, but it also was a free gift with purchase in North America in April of 2016, which is how I got mine. The Polybag features Sierra alongside her air glider, which is an airship that she references having multiple times in the early part of the episode, and we finally do get to see it once it's out of the shop when Sierra brings the elves to the secret marketplace and picks it up. Sierra is a pretty interesting character because despite being an Earth Elf, she unconventionally really enjoys flying and being in the skies, and feels that Earth Elves shouldn't just be constrained to walk along the ground, and so to mimic the powers of the Wind Elves, she has built an airship of her own which she uses to fly around. It's a fairly standard build, all things considered, for a Polybag, but I actually really do like how they mounted the wings, utilizing the grassy element tying back to Sierra's origins as the Earth Elf, but having the wing piece be used inside the vine is actually a really clever way to depict the airship, and I also like how because of that, you can actually choose to kind of angle it how you see fit. So if you want to have the wings at a bit of an angle, you can choose to have them angled like so, which is actually a look that I prefer a lot better to the original model. The actual vine pieces themselves are anchored in by these vines on the back here, providing not just aesthetic purposes to show the vines in the back of the airship, but also anchoring them inwards through the axle, making sure they're not going to separate out. And because of that, it makes for a pretty nice little glider. It's a fairly simple thing, and in the show it was just a pretty much small-scaled glider, but I really did appreciate how they even managed to fit the Polybag into the story itself. Now let's move on to the next location they visit. As the elves depart the secret village and marketplace, they are bid to seek out the Dragon Sanctuary, but on their way they encounter the Fire Dragon and a lava cave, as well as the incredibly important Shadow Fountain, where initially they are entranced to take a drink from the fountain, but are only stopped when they realize this was the source of evil in Elvendale. Now the set focuses on the Fire Dragon. This is set number 41175, Fire Dragon's Lava Cave, and retailed for $40 €40, and came with 441 pieces, which, adjusted for inflation, is around $51 today. Once more, unfortunately, only 2 mini dolls are actually included here. We have Emily, ready to roast some barbecues with the Fire Dragon's fire, and Azari, which makes sense to include with the Fire Dragon. Although again, I do bemoan the lack of mini dolls and wish they included at least just one more character. While the main focus is on the Fire Dragon, we're actually going to start off by taking a look at the location builds, because one of them is one of the most important locations in the entire Elves universe. This is technically the first canonical set appearance of the final villain of LEGO Elves, Noctura, although, of course, at the time we didn't know it and it just looked like a traditional fountain. This fountain has a pretty cool function, where upon first glance, I guess if you sort of ignore the evil statue on the top, maybe bend it backwards, or better yet just remove this evil marking, it might look like a normal fountain, perhaps something that you might want to drink from, full of magic, with a blue liquid, and this is actually something that factors in the story. The elves at first are drawn to it, wanting to drink from its waters, until the illusion lifts. You push the green crystal in, and you can see the water is actually infected with evil and is the source of evil magic in Elvendale. It's a very simple function, but a really clever one, and I love how they were able to work that into the story, with the elves at first being drawn in, and then realizing the fountain was no good. It's a super simple function, but one that is a really cool build, and I actually really like this fountain because it hints at a little bit of a darker undercurrent to the Elves lineup, and some more villains and even other forces operating from the shadows. Who created the fountain? Why is it here in Elvendale? Those questions wouldn't even be answered until 2018, and I do like how they were starting to just introduce different artifacts that basically allowed them to plant the seeds for future storytelling, even in a set like this. Moving onwards though to the other side build, this is the Fire Dragon's Lava Cave, the main point of the set, and the entire aspect for the play feature here is Azari can use her fire magic to open up the cave, and there is a very nice handy little fire symbol here that you slide it open and the lava opens up. It's also a very simple function, literally just a sliding door, but again, another one that I think is pretty clever. I always like it when the LEGO Elves sets go a little bit above and beyond and try to depict the elemental powers of the elves being in use, and this is a simple but effective display of how you can use the elemental powers to overcome your obstacle. Moving on to the back here, there's just a very simple set of beds, which I guess is kind of a necessity. I didn't really realize this, but now I'm realizing that almost every LEGO Elves set has a bed featured in the set, especially if it's location based. Is there like a mandate that you must include a place for the characters to sleep in a LEGO Elves set? I'm gonna have to start looking more closely, but if I think about it, there has been a bed in pretty much every single one, even if you count the bed for the owl in the Market Village. Moving on from this though, of course, the main focus of the set is the Fire Dragon, and they put a lot of effort into depicting this dragon. I'm gonna be completely honest though, this might be one of my least favorite dragons in the wave, and let me explain why. The reason for that all just boils down to articulation, because for one, the way the feet are mounted are on mixel joints, but you can't bend them any further past this particular very 90-degree point. So if you want to have the Fire Dragon walking with the feet on the ground, you can't really do that. The big problem for me though with this one is that the larger they get, the more apparent that you are restricted in articulation with the movement. And as you can see, despite it being mounted on mixel joints that allows you to bend the legs inwards, which just doesn't look really cool, it kind of looks awkward having the legs bent inwards, you literally cannot rotate the legs outwards past the certain point. They specifically design it such that you cannot do this, and I feel like that is a bit of a disappointment. I know it's for stability, I know it was to allow kids to be able to play with it easier, but imagine if they just mounted the legs one more stud out. Yes, you would have a bit of the light bluish gray and dark bluish gray mixel joints there, but I think it would have been a fine trade-off to actually be able to pose the dragon in much better poses than having the legs just completely vertical front and center, which ruins a lot of the illusion of having this be an actual living dragon and makes it really just feel like a toy. Otherwise though, the color scheme is nice. The flame yellowish orange and magenta is a really cool touch, but unfortunately also because of the way the head is mounted, it is on a mixel joint, but there's just this large block of the neck that it is wedged in between, so you can't even move the head side to side that much. Again, another point against the articulation here, so that's a bit disappointing. Color scheme wise, I love it. I think the magenta and the keyed orange is such a good color scheme with the magenta blades back here, here. You have the dual molded wings. This is the larger size wing this time in the flame yellowish orange and transparent pink, which is super cool. And I love the recolor of these large claw spike elements on the back of the head in magenta. It just really falls apart when it comes to the posability of the dragon. And while all of the dragons did suffer this issue, this one is the worst because I feel like this is the most traditional dragon you could do. There's nothing really extra setting it apart or distracting me from the limited articulation. This just really highlights how the LEGO Elves designers were trying to make their animals, and is an unfortunate problem that really persists throughout all of the other LEGO Elves builds. Otherwise though, I like the colors, I like the aesthetics, and with some modifications, this could be a really solid dragon. But as it is, as a set, just not really feeling it as a realistic style of moving creature. Of course, before we move on, I should talk a little bit about the price. $40 for this was pretty okay for its time, and even $51 today doesn't feel that bad given that you get this full-on dragon with the new dual molded components for the wings. So this actually had probably one of the best values for any LEGO Elf set. Maybe I'm getting tricked by the size of the dragon wings, but it's really working for me. I really like the value of this and feel like the amount of money that you were to pay back then is pretty fair. Unfortunately, aftermarket prices have not been kind to any sets of this wave in particular, meaning that if you want to buy this secondhand nowadays, be prepared to fork out a lot more money, but back then, it was a pretty solid deal. The final Wave 1 set to cover here is technically not a set that appeared until the second half of the year, and particularly in story, wasn't really necessarily canon, but I want to cover it as the final set of Wave 1, and we're about to see it in the story shortly. So basically the story left off with the gang encountering the fire dragon and befriending it to some extent, and the next location they have to visit is the Dragon Sanctuary, which is a summer set, which we'll take a look at after this. At the Dragon Sanctuary, they meet the Water Dragon, and this is 41172, the Water Dragon Adventure. It retailed for $20 or 25 euros and came with 212 pieces. Adjusted for inflation, that's around $26 today, and came with one mini doll Nida, as well as the Water Dragon and a bit of a small scenery side build. Despite this being the smallest dragon, this might actually be one of my favorites. And you know why? Well, that's because you can actually pose the legs. Yes, because this dragon was small enough, they allowed it to have more articulation in the legs, actually allowing them to move them outside of these standard mixel joints, and also the head is mounted on a mixel joint as well, a dual set for the neck, meaning that this is the most posable dragon out of all of the ones introduced for this year. See how big of a difference it makes to have this in such a fun and dynamic pose. Now, I can make the dragon be crouched down, almost like a dog, ready for action. It's kind of wagging the tail in the back, or you can have it standing up. You could maybe even try to do it crawling on one single, kind of with one leg up here. The possibilities of what you can do with this dragon are pretty endless because you actually have the ability to articulate it, unlike many of the other dragons, where I feel like LEGO just went way too overboard with trying to make sure they were stable when you place them down. As you can see here, all of the legs have free range of motion with the mixel joints with very few limitations. You can't really move it past this particular point at a splayed out fully angle, but you can move it all the way forwards like this, so really you just have pretty much no restrictions on the way you want to move the legs around. Same goes for the back legs. You have a really nice range of articulation, other than the fact that once again, you cannot really splay it outwards that much, but they even at least have it on a curve so you can sort of splay it outwards the further back that you go. Because of this extra added articulation, the entire thing is pretty much built up of different mixel joints. You can even bend the wings forwards and backwards because they're only mounted on one single Technic joint, and I don't know what went different with the development of this one other than that since it was the smallest dragon, they allowed it to have more points of articulation, but I really like it. I like that you can do so many different poses with it. You can't accomplish this pose that you're seeing right here with any of the other dragons in the wave because they simply just don't articulate like that, and I always love a ton of articulation. Just makes them much better toys to play with and fun to pose, so I'm a big fan of how they pulled off the Water Dragon. You also get this really nice scenery side build for the Elvendale part of the build, which has some crystals mounted at an angle. There's actually a hidden set of binoculars here, so the play feature is you lift one of the crystals up, and then the pair of binoculars can slide out. I think you can also have the map be hidden there as well, which maybe that makes more sense. Maybe I shouldn't have put the binoculars in there, and it made much more sense to put the map in there. But you know, you can hide whatever you want in there, which is a nice little touch. There is the addition of a clam piece, which is a classic LEGO element. Good to see that make an appearance. And you also have a little water catapult, which allows you to fling these little tree droppings. They can kind of cascade over the water, and it's a nice little play feature, just super simple. And I like how they recolored the catapult to make it blend in and make it feel like it's just part of the babbling brook or stream itself. And overall, as a $20 set, this is surprisingly one of my favorites. I think it's actually one of the strongest sets in this Elves wave. The dragon isn't too oversized, but it is just the right size to play with. It has that very cute chibi aesthetic of the head being larger for the body, but again, it really works for LEGO Elves because it is kind of a more cutesy line, and I just love the amount of articulation. You get a beautiful piece of scenery and a great mini doll as well. What's not to like? It's a really good entry point and easily one of my favorite and strongest sets of the wave. But now let's turn our attention to the summer wave of LEGO Elves, where we got our first mini doll villain, new outfits for all of the characters except Farron again, as well as a couple more mini dolls and animals, so let's go ahead and take a look at those characters first. The Elf Squad receives a massive update aesthetically speaking for the second half of the year, once again still retaining the standard outfits that they wore in the earlier half, but receiving a brand new mold for a hooded elf wig, where you can see the elf ears are poking out on the side, but each of the elves has a really nicely detailed hood to go alongside them. And even better, all of these sets that included a hood also included their hair if you wanted to display them that way. Each of the elf characters gets a brand new mold for the cloak as well, or a brand new cut of fabric, where you can see it has a really nice intricate detailing for the way they have the cloth being draped around the mini dolls. They actually have 3 different holes to be used for the cloth there to make it fall over their shoulders, and they just look so cool with all the cloaks. Emily's cloak is actually probably my favorite because they actually managed to print it with this metallic gold printing that looks absolutely phenomenal as a design, and overall, these looks are some of my favorites that we ever got for the elves, even going into the later years. Once more though, somewhat unfortunately, actually very unfortunately, Farron is excluded from the company. For whatever reason, they did not include Farron in any of the later sets, which doesn't really make any sense because in the webisodes and the mini-movies and the TV show, he also dons a cloak and a hood and goes along on the quest with them. So much like the first year in 2015, they chose to also exclude Farron because I guess the token guy character is less important than the main female characters. I don't really know why they did that, but it is a little disappointing to have an incomplete lineup of characters because they just keep forgetting to include him or choosing not to. Moving onwards to the villain side, we do however get our first villain mini doll in the form of Regana, the Shadow Elf. This is a really cool design, and I love the way they did the crown here, which is painted in black with the lime green center of the crown being a really nice touch to add on to the detailing. She's just using the standard skirt and gown element that we saw on some of the Disney princesses, but I think it works for the evil character. It makes her feel very regal with the crown, and accompanying her are 2 brand new prints of the LEGO Friends animals, an evil fox and an evil cat. And I like how she actually does have these evil looking animal companions, which do actually play a role in the show. The only other animal that we got other than the dragons was this little elf-inspired or Elvendale hamster. He appears in 2 different sets, and I'm not really sure what the story is behind it. They basically just reprinted the LEGO Friends hamster to have a more magical and fantasy-inspired design around the eyes, and I think it's a nice touch, although I don't necessarily know if we needed to get another animal, and I would have preferred that slot go to maybe something a bit more distinctive like the evil animals here. Maybe an evil hamster is what we were missing. That would have gone hard. Anyways, very, very good looks, easily some of my favorites across all of the LEGO Elves theme, but again unfortunate that Farron didn't get them. It is also unfortunate that these cloaks cannot really be used with minifigures without damaging them. The holes are intended to be used around mini doll necks, and because of that, they pretty much can just be used with mini dolls. Now, because of the material, you can stretch them and make them work for minifigures, but that would damage the cape, and given how rare these pieces are already, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. But they do look super cool, love the new hood elements, and I just wish that Farron got one too. Let's move on to the next part of the story. Continuing along with the story, the elves finally make it to the Dragon Sanctuary, a legendary safe haven where dragons and elves can coexist and live together. There they find the dragon school instructor Titus alongside the rest of the dragons ready to go on a quest to free the queen dragon from Regana, and this is where the story started picking up in terms of action. The dragons were united, and this was kind of the final safe haven before descending into danger. This is set number 41178, the Dragon Sanctuary, which came with $50 or 50 euros and 585 pieces, which is around $65 today adjusted for inflation. This was one of the shortest lived LEGO Elf sets. This and the prior set that we're about to take a look at only were available for 6 months, which means that the aftermarket prices of this are pretty insane. One thing I do want to note is that for some reason I decided to stop putting the stickers on halfway through the set. I don't have a logical explanation for that. I don't really know why that's the case, but there's supposed to be a sticker here, and a sticker on the inside. Even stranger, there are 2 Bricklink listings for the sticker sheet because I tried to buy it. One of them is from the UK, and it includes literally only the stickers I'm missing and says it doesn't include the 3 stickers I already applied. So that is some crazy twist of fate. That sticker sheet is just meant for me to own it. Unfortunately, it's $25 for an incomplete sticker sheet, and I'd have to ship it from the UK, and I don't care about these 2 stickers that much. But hey, you know, if anyone's selling the sticker sheet for this set, please do let me know in the comments because I would love to complete it. The set includes 2 mini dolls, which again feel like they could have included more, but I'm sounding like a broken record at this point, so I'm just gonna let it be for now, as well as the Wind Dragon here, which is the largest of the standard elemental dragons, plus a baby water dragon inside the baby water dragon egg. It also includes little elemental spots for all of the other dragons. You can see a fire stand, a water stand, an earth stand, and the air stand here, and what you're supposed to do is basically place the eggs on top of these like so, and essentially have a place to store all of the eggs in one place, which is pretty cool. Of course, that doesn't mean you have to collect all the sets because it only does come with the water egg, but I always do appreciate it when LEGO does incorporate different types of builds, allowing you to see what it might look like to combine all of your different dragon eggs in one build. So, if you're curious what that looks like, if I can manage to balance the Wind Dragon egg here, which is honestly not the best stand for these, I definitely feel like the stands could have been a bit better, this is what the set would look like with all of the dragon eggs attached, which is pretty striking, and I really do love how that looks. Moving these aside though, let's go ahead and jump inwards to what you actually get with the set. I'm going to start off with the Wind Dragon because this is actually going to be a pretty quick one to go through, and the reason for that is because the Wind Dragon's build is literally identical to that of the Fire Dragon, with only one major difference. Technically, the saddle is different too, but the big difference is that in the show, the Wind Dragon is depicted to have 4 wings. The way they pulled it off in the set was to also include 4 wings, but the way they did it was mounting the secondary wing underneath the top wing here, and you can bend that back and forth and choose whichever way you want to orient it. So you can have it kind of hidden away underneath one of the wings, and it can later unfurl and showcase the second wing there. I think that is a pretty cool function, having a hidden set of wings underneath the main wings, and it makes the entire wing feel a lot larger, but I do kind of wish they found out a way to make them articulate separately from each other in this way as well. I guess you can kind of bend them and that sort of works, and you can rotate this, but the show depicts them as having kind of full autonomy as 4 separate wings, and I would have loved to do something almost like an X-Wing dragon like this, and having one set of wings on the bottom and one set of wings on the top, and have them maybe like be flapping in a different direction for each other would be really cool. Even cooler if they did like a mechanism for that, but I understand that might have been asking for a little bit too much with what they were trying to pull off with the Elves dragons back in this era, so I'll accept it for what it is. Back then I remember thinking it was really cool how one of the dragons actually did have 4 wings, and I think that does a lot to elevate this dragon above the others. While it has the same exact problem as the Fire Dragon of having big basically no articulation in the ways that it matters in the front legs. You just can't move them past this certain point. It's a bit disappointing for that. Thankfully, I do like to display my dragons hanging from the ceiling and flying in the air, so it's a lot less noticeable when you have it flying like this, and this definitely does look a lot better in the flying pose. Moving alongside from the dragon though, sorry about the creaky joints, wow, I haven't moved these joints around in a long time. You can see the tail has some feathers on the back here using the Chima eagle wings, which I think work out very well for a wind dragon like this, and the color scheme is actually quite nice as well with the lavender and light aqua coloration. This would actually be not the only time we would get a wind dragon in the LEGO Elves theme. 2018 would give us another smaller wind dragon, and it'll be interesting to compare the two later on. But now let's move on to the main build, which is the Dragon Sanctuary. The Dragon Sanctuary is a pretty nice little tower, and I really appreciate how you have representation from all of the different elements factored into the tower. There's also a little bit of a side build of a small tiny boat, so you can place the water dragon on the boat and then actually have it kind of cascade down this little waterfall. It's a cute little build, and I do like it because you can just play with the dragon in that sense, kind of racing down the water, but clearly this is just something they really just had extra budget for and decided to throw it in for the set. Otherwise, speaking of the build going from the bottom working away to the top, we have a little boat which can be mounted on the side, and then onto here you can see a diagram which can be rotated, showcasing the Queen Dragon facing off against Regana, or maybe someone taming the Queen Dragon, not really sure what that sticker is conveying. But then on this side you have a showcase of when you blow the horn, the dragons will come, and it's your way to summon all of the dragons into one location. On the underside of the Dragon Sanctuary is a small little bath and spa area, which is pretty cool to see a place for the characters to relax, and from here you get to one of my favorite features of the set, which is another usage of the elemental powers of the characters factoring into the build. If you push down on this lever, you can see here Titus can use his water elemental powers to have an elevator actually move upwards, and this is how you get to the second level. For what they are, the LEGO Elves sets are remarkably good at explaining how you get from one level to the next. This is something that honestly not a lot of other LEGO themes do very well. They don't really have clear ways to get from one part of the set to another, but the LEGO Elves designers really made it very clear and obvious how you could get from one set to the next, which is pretty cool how they did that. So once you go up, you can have your mini dolls walk up to the next level and work our way upwards to the inner chamber here. This is where you can see another play function has arisen, and to be honest, I'm not entirely sure I understand the meaning of this play function. What happens is that you can push this lever out, and it basically is just a sliding platform, but I don't really understand this. Like, it's not like you're hiding anything by doing this, it's not like this is a big reveal. I don't know, I don't really get it. Like, maybe this is just an extending plank that you can have extend outwards to allow the dragons to perch and then maybe like come inwards. I guess that kind of makes sense, although I don't really know if we needed to have a play feature here, and since we did have a play feature, I kind of was expecting this to do something a little bit cooler than just be a plank that pulls outwards. That's honestly a little bit lame. Otherwise though, it's a nice little interior, you have a little gem in there, and once again, they did at least try to explain how you get to the next level. There is the most bare bones semblance of a ladder here, which allows you to work your way up to the top flame, which is kind of along this transparent purple dish. That's a really cool flame element there, and you can blow on the horn to summon all of the dragons to your aid. So this is the main feature of the set. Titus can stand up here and blow the horn and summon the dragons to have a council meeting of dragons at the Dragon Sanctuary. I think my favorite little detail of this set is just the inclusion of the golden Chima eagle wings on the top there, which at the angle they're at make it look really cool and really does make it look like the actual logo for the wind elementals, which again, if you zoom into the Ira minifigure right here, the way the feathers are oriented there looks a lot like the way they brick built it here with the wings, so that is a really nice touch. Overall though, this is a pretty solid set. I do like it as kind of a last base and literally a last sanctuary before descending into the Shadowlands. The dragon is not one of my favorites, but I do love the four-wing design. I just wish they pushed that design even further than the way they actually did, and the price for what it is not too bad. Oh, again, should have had at least one more mini doll character. Maybe Farin with the hood would have been really great. But now let's move on to the next set they encounter along their journey. The next step in the Elves' quest is to delve into the Shadowlands and go into the throne room of Regana to be able to free the Queen Dragon. But in order to get to the throne room, they need to pass through the precious crystal mines. At this point in the story, Ira has been separated from the main group, taking care of the rest of the dragons with the side characters they've met on their journey, and trying to make her way over to Regana while the rest of the gang has to press on, leaving just Emily, Azari, Farron, and Nida to carry on the quest. This is set number 41177, the Precious Crystal Mine. It retailed for $30 or 25 euros when it released for 273 pieces, which is around $38 today. This was also the appearance of the baby Earth Dragon and the Earth Dragon egg, which actually is remarkably show accurate, because not only did the baby Earth Dragon hatch while they were traversing through the mine, but we also did see one of these elf hamsters hard at work mining the precious crystals in a split-second shot, showing that this set was clearly more accurate than maybe they even intended. Well, diving into the set itself, you can see there is a sign pointing them towards the entrance to Regana's Shadow Castle, and the main play feature of the set is honestly probably one of my favorite play features in any elf set, mostly because of just how much fun it is to actuate. So how this works is you take this little minecart boat style of thing. In the show it's just a standard minecart, but here they had you kind of treating it like a part boat, part minecart as you flow down the waterfall and go along the tracks. But you mount the dragon to the front, you put your elf inside, and then you just go ahead and actuate this lever here. You pull this tree backwards, and boom, the whole thing slides downwards, and you might have noticed that as you do, you uncover the map in the process, which was since covered by a rock. And let's just see that one more time. It's a really fun play feature. So you bend this backwards like so, and boom, super satisfying. You slide down and go like that. This is so much fun, and I really like how they are able to incorporate the slide as an actual play feature itself, where instead of just sending mini dolls down the slide, you actually send this entire boat or minecart contraption down the whole slide, which is a ton of fun, and it feels like it really is just meant to interface with the way they did the train tracks here, so that is super cool. Love the play function of this set. It is probably one of my favorite play functions out of any Elves set, and yeah, it's pretty simple and rudimentary in the way it works, but it's a lot of fun, and it's just so satisfying to do it over and over again. As far as the rest of the set, it is meant to be an underground location, and I guess the entire point is that you can take a minecart from above ground, where you can see the above ground foliage here with a tree, you take it downwards, you go down this waterfall, and until you find yourself at the underside of the mines, which is a fairly decent play feature. Obviously it played out a bit differently in the show, but I think it makes sense to have that transition from the above ground theatrics and the above ground world going down into these caves. On the inside here, there is a little bit of a hidden area as well, so if you move this small piece aside, there is actually a hinge joint here, which allows you, if I can just get a good grip on it, there we go, to reveal a hidden gem, which is actually a really nice specialized printed element for this set. It's a pretty cool piece, and I wish that they included it in more sets because it is a nice collectible, but that's just one thing that's hidden away inside the mysterious crystal mine. Otherwise, I do like the design of the set. It's pretty simple in the way it's built. You've got crystals growing out of the sides, you have a pickaxe alongside here, you even have a side build that you can use to actually hammer this heart-shaped rock, and maybe this is actually, maybe it's not mining, maybe this hamster is actually a contracted employee of Regana, where you can see that he's been given dimensions of a heart to carve out of a crystal, so, you know, he's doing some jewelry work. Let him cook, you know, let him cook. He's got a piece of cheese there to snack on while working. Let's hope he's being paid fairly for his work, and there he is toiling away in the mines. Overall, it's a cute little set. $30 is a pretty good price to pay for something like this, and I love the inclusion of the baby dragon egg as well, and this is just one of my favorite smaller scale LEGO Elf sets. It tells a story, it has a really fun function, and is a nice little slice of life along the elves' journey into the Shadowlands. But now let's dip our feet into the Shadowlands proper, starting off with the Queen Dragon Rescue. After proceeding through the perilous Crystal Cavern, they find their way into Regana's Magic Shadow Castle, where the first thing they need to do is go ahead and find the Queen Dragon to free her. The way the story plays out is as they sneak through the castle, they first encounter Regana, have a battle with her, and then free the dragon, but I'm gonna go in order of the dragon freeing set first because we're gonna be saving the best for last. This is 41179 Queen Dragon's Rescue. It retailed for $70 or 70 euros and came with 833 pieces, which is pretty good. Adjusted for inflation, that would be $90 today, which is less good, $90 for 833 pieces, but it is still in the realm of reasonability. It did come with 2 mini dolls, of course, the exclusive versions of Emily and Azari, one with the hood and one with the cloak, as well as representing the villain side, just the evil fox commanded by Regana. I feel like for a set like this, it's $70, just throw Regana in. I know they wanted to keep her exclusive to one set, but I really do feel they could have totally put her in this set and also put her in the larger castle set, and it would have been totally good to actually have them face off against the main villain. Having literally only one member of the evil side represented here, and that's just the little fox that I do appreciate does have a spot to man the stud launcher here. That's actually pretty funny how they actually have a spot for the animal to man the defenses, but it feels a little lackluster as a defense against the elves who are breaking in. Otherwise, the way the set is supposed to go is you have to journey through the set using your elemental powers to eventually make your way over to free the Queen Dragon. So let's see how that works right now. We're going to start off with the main building part of the set, and this is the most linear set that they've done so far in terms of there being a clear flow in how you're supposed to play with the story. You start by having your characters go up the steps here, and you first have to have Azari use her fire magic to create a path. It starts off just like this, and there's actually an arrow pointing the direction that you have to go here, and as you rotate this piece here, it just very simply but cleanly showcases that stones have moved their way up in the lava, and you can now make your way across the lava. So Azari and the friends are jumping across, making their way into the Shadow Castle until they get to the inside of the cavern here. Here they may have to face off against a animal that is kind of scratching the marks in the wall for the cheese there, but the real functionality of this is, well, how do you get to the staircase to go up? And in true Elves fashion, they have a very clear way to get from point A to point B. You pull the lever here, and that will raise the doorway. This is an entire raising gate that allows you to then exit the building and enter the upper levels of the castle. And I also really love how as this raises upwards, you actually have it act as the window for the upper levels, allowing this piece to have a dual functionality. Working your way up the stairs, you can make your way to the second level where you can see there is a small little bed. Once again, the elf sets are never denying the including a bed in every building allegations, but you can see there's a bed there for, I guess, the evil animals to sleep, which is pretty cute because it's obviously too small for a mini doll, so this is clearly for the animals, as well as a key. You can take the key, and if you manage to fend off the defenses of the enchanted firing crossbow at the top here, manned by the evil fox, you'll be able to free the Queen Dragon. The dragon is chained to the building utilizing a transparent green chain and this lock here, but all you need to do is open up the lock just like that, bend it outwards, and voila, the Queen Dragon has been rescued. Let's take a look at that Queen Dragon, which is said to be one of the best LEGO Elves dragons. And while I do agree this is a really cool dragon, and I love the aesthetics and the color scheme, it definitely is lacking in terms of articulation, because the way they did it is that basically they didn't even try to hide it this time. You literally cannot move the legs outside of just back and forth. In fact, they are mounted on axles, which in turn are connected to Bionicle's CCBS hand connector pieces with ball joints, adding friction in the movement of the legs, allowing you to sway the legs back and forth, but not really splay them out. This results in a bit of awkward posing, also because of the way the feet are mounted. They are on mixel joints, but again, when you're having it be walking this way, you can't really bend them that much, so you can kind of get it in a pose like this. Like this kind of works, like it feels a little bit alive, like it's crouching down like this, but The illusion is quickly broken when you just take it face forwards and notice that the legs are basically just rectangles that you can't really move outside of this positioning. Once again, this to me is the weakest aspect of the LEGO Elves dragons and many of their other animals, the lack of articulation that you can actually play around with the animals themselves. It is a bit unfortunate, but overall I definitely feel that because of the size and the sculpting of the dragon, it doesn't really bother me as much as it does with some of the other ones. And for the Queen Dragon, what they did is they introduced an even larger headpiece that is basically just the big version of the other dragon heads. It's using the smaller jaw, so I don't know, it feels a little funny to have such a small lower jaw, but I think it works for what they were trying to do, and I appreciate how large this is. You can actually stick these large horns via Technic pins on the side, and you can actually have a full range of motion on the ball joint for the head, as well as for the neck, which is mounted on a ratchet joint, allowing you to raise and lower the neck and even rotate it on this joint as well. The wings are thankfully mounted on ball joints, Bionicle Hero Factory style ball joints, so you can angle them every which way you want. They are these large vinyl elements, which honestly I usually prefer cloth, but I actually think it works really good for this because they wanted to make it partially transparent to show the transparent blue aspect of the wings. So it actually works quite well. I think the vinyl element was the right choice to do for the Queen Dragon here, and of course you can bend it backwards and forwards, back and forth here, close it to the side, up and down for it flying through the air. It's just a really nicely built up dragon, and there is space to mount two different mini dolls attached on the top saddle there. The back tail is flame yellowish orange, white, and transparent blue, and it's mounted all on mixel joints, so you can really just swing this in all sorts of different poses, much like many of the other dragons, which is a really nice touch. And overall, it is the largest animal that we would ever get from LEGO Elves. We wouldn't ever get an animal bigger than this, but it totally makes sense to do it for the Queen Dragon. If only the legs were just a little bit better to pose and articulate, and maybe the feet weren't so blocky and rectangular, this would be an all-time LEGO Dragon for me, because the color scheme is amazing, the sculpt of the body is actually really good. I love that you can see the formation of the muscles and the way the animal works. It's just the legs that are killing it for me, and I really wish they just improved the way they did the legs. Still, it's a beautiful set, and I think price-wise, this was actually a pretty good value, especially for the time when it came out. Do I wish that it also included Farron with a cloak? Absolutely, because he is blatantly missing from the sets, and it is very, very obvious that they just decided that he wasn't as important as the other characters and didn't deserve a full-on cloak, and 2 mini dolls for this just feels like you really should have gotten more. Throw in Farron and throw in the villain. I get that these are better produced mini dolls than the standard LEGO Friends set, and they require a lot more ornate detailing, dual molding for the skirts, and new pieces and all that, but I still think they totally should have included a few more characters to really flesh out the scene. But you know, it's LEGO Elves, what else is new? And with that, let's move on to the final set of the wave, the final battle, the final confrontation with Regana the Shadow Witch at her castle. The elves had made it into Regana's magic shadow castle, her inner sanctum, and just as they are about to free the Queen Dragon, she confronts them and an elemental battle commences, until eventually, throughout their battle, Emily Jones realizes her amulet holds the key to defeating Regana. Wielding it to funnel the elves' magic through the amulet, they manage to strike back against the Shadow Witch, causing the chandelier to fall and crash down upon Regana, ending the threat of the evil witch once and for all. She is dissipated into a shadow form and flees the castle, although later in other webisodes, she does later appear in mini doll form, although the canonicity of those are maybe a little bit dubious. This is set number 41180, Regana's Magic Shadow Castle. It contained 1,014 pieces, had 3 mini dolls, Regana as well as the hooded forms of Nida and Ira, and retailed for $100 or 90 euros back in June of 2016, which is around $130 today. This is easily one of my favorite LEGO Elves sets ever, and a lot of that is due to the absolutely wicked cool aesthetics. This was our first full-on villain lair for the LEGO Elves theme, and it absolutely did not disappoint. One of my favorite features is as you actually enter the building, you can place Regana on the steps, and wielding her magic, she can command the doors to open. Pushing her forward, it's almost like she's gliding on magic. The doors swing open and she's able to enter. They actually reused this play feature in a LEGO Ninjago set years later, the Skull Sorcerer's Dungeon, which also had an incredibly similar function. I think it was actually almost the exact same building techniques to pull this off, and hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, because this is so cool how this actually works. It's very satisfying to have the door actually open up, and if Regana is right near the front of the door, she then finds herself in the inside of her own castle, her own domain, which is just so cool to actually have as its own play function. Of course, there are a lot more things that you can do with it, so we're going to start from the bottom, working our way up to the top. There's a couple different ways in which you can enter the castle. You can go through the main gates, but only a fool would try to breach the castle through the main gates, so there is an alternate way. If you step up alongside a hidden pathway on the side here, you might notice that you're sneaking around the jail cell and can make your way up to the upper level for the Shadow Throne. But watch out, because there is a hidden trapdoor. If Regana catches you in front of her throne, which is also built up really nicely utilizing these mystical Ninjago possession, ghost, and Chima fire versus ice elements here, you can just pull the Bionicle Voodoo Ball joint out, and boom, the trapdoor will release you into the jail below. It's a very simple, tried and true LEGO play feature, but one that works pretty nicely for what it's trying to be. But, of course, you can always stage a jailbreak. Actuating a hidden lever at the side of the jail cell allows you to flick it forwards, and boom, you've staged a jailbreak, and you can break free of the jail and continue your exploration of the castle. As you work your way across the upper levels, going back around the staircase here, you may encounter a swaying bridge, but watch out. If your command over the elements is weak, you might actually fall off of the bridge as it begins to sway back and forth. Sadly, there is no way to actuate this function. I always like it when they actually have levers that you can twist and turn to sway the bridge, but this is all a manual process. You can kind of cause it to tilt back and forth, but it's a nice little touch, and you can fall into the deadly spikes and waterfall below. Going on to the inside of the castle once the main doors are open, if you are bold or foolish enough to confront Regana right inside her main castle, you'll notice a shield featuring a magical emblem as a sticker on top here, a crackling fireplace with a lava fall behind it, a bookshelf on the inside, there is even a sofa, you know, it's a pretty comfy villain lair, and a portrait of Regana sitting in front of her throne, which is a really nice touch, and I always love those little graphical details that showcase the characters in different positions. Moving on upwards, you have the quintessential LEGO Elves bed, and this is probably the best bed they have done so far. I would love to sleep in a bed like this. It's got a very nice ornate bedpost, it's got a green gem glowing above your head, which maybe could double as a nightlight as well. It's got evil ornate detailing on the side of it. You even have a bottle of mysterious liquid alongside your bed at all times. You know, I always do like to have something like that alongside my bed at all times, and you even have a hidden map stored on the inside where you can pull out underneath the bed and you can see that there is the map to the castle alongside a letter as well. It's a pretty cool play feature and easily the most ornately detailed bed they've done, and even better, you can even remove the bed. So if you want to take the bed and use it in your own home, you can choose to do it only now from Regana's IKEA store. Putting this back inside the castle, you can see that there is another sort of level over here, and this includes an evil staff for Regana to use. I'm actually going to go ahead and give that to her right now, which is a nice little accessory for her to wield. It's a pretty simple build, but it's a nice one to just add into the set, and she can maybe even use it to stir up inside the cauldron here, where different potions are being brewed for some evil intent. Alongside this banner, you can see that there is a vinyl flag showcasing the logo of Regana, which is a nice one to complement the dragon ones, and here is a beautiful sticker on a transparent green window. One of my favorite details of the set is this sticker right here. Moving on to the upper level here, you'll notice two different reflective surfaces. Regana is obviously very vain and loves to look at her own reflection in the mirror, so you can see it actually is a functioning mirror. She can look at it there, or she can look at herself in the smaller mirror here, which is actually a reflective sticker placed on a frying pan piece. Inside there is a sink where she can get ready for the day, of course using her evil ointments and various accessories to always look her best when doing evil crimes. And on the top there is a little carton of milk for her other evildoers to be able to drink from. We all know milk is associated with only the most vile villains like Homelander, so of course it makes sense that a jar of milk would be in the villain's base here. And with that, that is pretty much all you can do inside the castle, but that actually was quite a lot. There is a ton of stuff that you can do here, from the really fun play function to have the doors actually open up, to the way that you can stage a jailbreak from the cell, to the throne, to the trapdoor, to the swaying bridge. This has it all when it comes to a villain playset. It has aesthetics, it has style, and I just love the presentation of the set. The recolor of the Chima blade elements for the Fire Tribe in black is so cool, and they just have a very nice silhouette for the castle itself, showcasing an evil stone dragon head carved into the castle as a warning to all who dare enter. Overall, this is easily one of the best LEGO Elves playsets, and honestly, this was a really hard one to top. I think I maybe like next year's Goblin King Fortress a little better than this, but only ever so slightly, and they might actually be just on the same level. Otherwise, it's easily one of the strongest buildings they did. It has a full-on interior, there's a lot of play patterns that you can do. One of the side builds also was a little catapult the elves could use to lay siege to the castle, although unfortunately, just couldn't find that one anywhere in my collection, but the focus is on the castle. And for $100 back in 2016, this was a pretty good deal. Even $130 today is a really solid build to get as an entire play structure where there's just so much that you can do packed into a building like this. It's definitely among my top 2 or maybe even top 1 favorite Elves buildings, and such a good way to end our look at the wave. But with that, let's take a look at the wave as a whole and how I feel about LEGO Elves 2016. Oh, and one last thing. Yes, I'm gonna be a broken record at this point, but why does the $100 set only include 3 mini dolls? Give us Farron, please. So that was our look at the sets and storyline of LEGO Elves 2016. You can really see this LEGO theme took things up a notch, where 2015 was more focused on world building and peaceful exploration, and just a few smaller sets here and there. We got much larger sets this time around, dragons as a main focus, and a much more detailed story. While admittedly the antagonist Regana was probably the most one-dimensional and one-note villain you could have had in an original LEGO theme, I think she makes sense as a starter villain, kind of just someone who is just evil for the sake of being evil, wants to capture dragons to use their powers, and because of that, the theme and story followed a lot of these similar tropes that you would see in LEGO action-adventure themes of its time. It was like LEGO was replaying its greatest hits but with an Elves theme, and I actually really like that. They played it safe for an action-adventure theme, but didn't play it safe when it came to a girl-oriented theme, and really tried to dive into actual evil villains and battles being showcased here, something that would become more and more of a focus as Elves went on. The story would not get as complex and interesting until 2017's Goblin King years, where we really got the fully fledged Netflix series with 8 episodes and a very interesting villain, but this was a pretty good start, and having a 45-minute special of 2 22-minute episodes was a really nice way to introduce viewers to the story and the setting of Elves in 2016. I love the little lore additions like the Shadow Fountain, definitely playing a future role in the storyline, and all the different aspects that came with the training and collecting of dragons, and of course, the collectibles were absolutely amazing with the little cute baby dragons in their eggs. 2016 was one of the strongest years for LEGO Elves and was a really big update in my opinion from 2015, and I really do like how a lot of these sets, bigger did actually mean better for many of the builds, even though some of my favorite builds were the smaller ones like the small $30 mine and the small $20 water dragon being surprising standouts of the wave. But that sums up our coverage of LEGO Elves 2016, and join us this time next week when we take a look at what was, in my opinion, the peak of LEGO Elves, both in storytelling and sets, 2017, the Goblin Year, which also was probably the most underrated lineup of sets too, selling incredibly poorly, which is such a shame. Let's dive into that next week, but I hope you enjoyed this video and thanks for watching.